So a couple of weeks ago, I asked everyone on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram if you had any soil questions. And you guys have a lot of questions. I think it's awesome. I'm so happy that you guys are curious about soil. And I am here to answer your questions. I can't fit all of the questions and answers into one video, so this is going to be part one of a 3, maybe 4-part video, but I'm going to answer everything that was submitted. So thank you everybody for your questions. This has been a lot of fun coming up with the answers and seeing what you all have questions about. So this is kind of a more of a laid back video. So let's answer your soil questions together. Okay, so I've got 3 questions that I'm answering in today's video, and it's going to cover a lot of topics, so let's get right into it. The first question is from Growing in the Cactus Patch. I am expanding my garden into a previous pasture area. What should I start to amend it with for vegetables? It is native soil and weed-free. Thank you, Growing in the Cactus Patch. That's an awesome question. So there's a couple of things that I suggest. The first is to go to the NRCS website, put in your address, and look up what type of soil you have. This is really important. So the NRCS website, I did a video about how to find out what soil that you have by using their tools, and I'll link it right here. It's really important to know your native soil because that differs around the country, and if you're trying to use that to grow your vegetables, then you need to know if it's more sandy, more silty, or clay, so you know what to add and how to amend it in order to help it to grow vegetables. So for instance, if you have more of a clay soil, that's harder for plant roots to grow down through because it's going to be heavy as it doesn't release a lot of moisture. So you would want to amend that with sand to make it a little bit more airy to allow for better water and air pore spaces. If your soil is more sandy, you're going to need to add compost and to add clay because water and nutrients just wash through the sand and it's not going to support your plant life either. The reason why you want to go to the NRCS website is because they have the most extensive mapping. They have gone through and done physical soil mapping. They've used satellites and all sorts of other tools to determine what type of soil that you have, and you can get down to your address level. It's pretty incredible. There's a whole bunch of detail that it will give you. A lot of it is well beyond what you may need to know just to answer this question, but it's also kind of fun to see what soil that you have at your address, at your town, within your state. But the first thing that I would do, because you're using your native soil, is to go to that website. Please take a look at my prior video on how to use the website in order to find out what soil that you have, and that will give you a really good start so that way you know what you're dealing with. Second, get a soil test. So what you're going to do here is take a sample of soil. You may take a sample of soil from one area, but you're probably going to get a couple of different samples from a few spots in your area and combine it. It kind of just depends on how the soil testing company wants it done. So how do you find a soil testing company? There's a couple of ways. You can go to Google and you can simply type in soil testing or soil testing company. You can do that on maps or through a Google search and see what's in your area. A lot of the soil testing is offered through university extension services. So that way, basically, there's the different soil and plant and agricultural departments within universities, and they'll have labs that are open to the public. And you can send your soil samples in to get tested. So what does it mean to get a soil sample tested? Well, you send your soil in to the lab by collecting your sample, boxing it up, and saying, here you go, lab, here's my soil. And you pay for different tests. They vary in price, and it can get expensive. I'm just giving you that heads up right now. Some companies and some labs will test for pesticides. Others will test for nutrient availability. What I recommend for you, because you're using the native soil, if you know nothing has been sprayed on it in a while, then you may benefit from just doing a nutrient test. There are different nutrient tests out there. You don't need to go into the micronutrients. You probably just need a macronutrient panel, something with NPK. You don't really need to get into the minor nutrients of it. But there may be a company that would offer a comprehensive nutrient panel, and I would really recommend that because that will give you a lot that you need to know. What you're going to do with this information is you're going to look at it and you're going to say, oh, okay, it's telling me that my soil is low in this nutrient or this nutrient, and you can literally go and buy it. If you are growing organically, there's a couple of great companies that have those amendments. Down to Earth Organics is something that I've used for a long time. No, they are not sponsored and they're not paying me to say this. I'm just letting you know I use them. If you're doing more conventional, I don't really know the brands that would offer those type of nutrients, but it's something you can easily Google and easily go to your Home Depot or Lowe's and get those products. Follow the ingredients on the bag. I can't tell you in this video or in person you need to add a cup per yard or dig down 6 inches, and the reason being is because it's different for each soil, each individual, and each soil test results as they come back. So just take a look at the bag, and if it says to add this much and to do this, please follow those instructions. The third thing I would recommend after you have found out what native soil that you have and you've gotten your soil tested is to plant a couple of test crops. So you've already determined that your soil is more clay or more sand. You have found out how to fix it through a soil test and what nutrients that it's missing. So now plant a couple of test crops. Don't just go ahead and plant a whole bunch of the crops you were planning to plant in the first place. Plant a couple, see how they do. If those tomatoes still aren't growing the way that you want, maybe do another soil test or give it time for those nutrients to sink in. The thing is that if you apply a liquid, a powder, or granular fertilizer, all of to add the nutrients to your soil, those things break down differently over time. It's not just a same process. Liquid gets absorbed into the soil very quickly. A granular takes time to break down, and a powder is kind of somewhere in between, but it really depends on the content of it. So go ahead and try to plant a couple of things. See how they do. If it's still not the way that you want it, get another soil test or wait a little bit for the nutrients to sink in and see how it goes. There's a wood bee flying around, so if you guys hear a buzzing, it's the awesome wood bee. I hope he comes back. He's a lot of fun. Okay, so question number 2 is from my friends Mario and Sierra's Tiny House. They asked a couple of questions that are a little bit more short answer format, so we're going to answer them all. Question 1, do soils run out of nutrients? 2, how do you revitalize soil that doesn't grow much? 3, how do you know if you have healthy, good soil or bad soil? 4, how do I test my soil? And 5, what soil is good for plants? Awesome questions. So the first question, do soils run out of nutrients? Yes, they definitely do. So every time that you plant something, that plant is going to be taking up nutrients from the soil, and it doesn't always add the nutrients back. They're just like humans and animals. When the soil is just like humans and animals, where you will constantly need nutrients for energy, growth, and homeostasis. So let's say that you plant a tomato, that you plant a cucumber. That cucumber and tomato is going to need the nutrients from the soil in order to produce the fruit. But it doesn't put those nutrients back into the soil. So it's a really good idea to nutrient your soil before and after planting. Before, that way the plant has enough nutrients to take up. Okay, we'll just let it go. Before, you nutrient before, that way your soil has enough nutrients for your plants to be able to take up for the upcoming plant growth, and nutrient after, that way you're able to provide the soil with those nutrients that the plant took. But there's a couple of cool tricks that you can do with this. So you don't necessarily have to go buy the nutrients in a couple of cases, and here's what I mean. The main one is legumes. If your soil is lacking in nitrogen, Legumes fix nitrogen, and nitrogen's not broken. It doesn't need to be fixed. They're not in the soil with little wrenches and hammers fixing the nitrogen. Basically, what it means is that these plants help to make nitrogen available for plants. It's not the correct way for me to say it, but we're going to get into that into a later episode. I just don't want to get into too much detail of it here. So if your plant requires a lot of nitrogen or your soil is lacking in nitrogen, you can plant legumes such as peas and beans, and it's going to help to pump that nitrogen into the soil, and then it's available for your plants to use, which is one of the reasons why beans and peas are really cool companion crops for a lot of other plants. Another thing that you can do too is use what's something called a grain manure, and I plan on doing that this summer. There are way too many things that we cannot plant here in the summers in Arizona, at least in the Phoenix area where I'm at, because it just gets too hot. But during the June, July, August time frame. But there are some heat-resistant alfalfa strands, and I bought a bag of one of them. I think it was from Johnny Seeds. Again, not sponsored. And what happens is when your soil is bare, meaning it doesn't have any crops on it, you plant this alfalfa and you let it grow. And then at certain stages, you could till it into the soil, providing that soil with gorgeous green matter that it will break down and extract the nutrients from. So it's a good way to prevent your soil from drying out and losing all of its nutrients during the summer while growing something that's going to benefit your future crops. And yeah, this can work in other areas than Phoenix, but you want to make sure that you do your research as far as what will grow in that area. So I've heard of some people using amaranth, some people using wheat. There's different types of cover crops. So if you're interested in doing a green manure, look at what green manure or cover crop will work for my soil in the zone that you're in. 2, how do you revitalize soil that doesn't grow much? Well, this goes back to the other question from growing in the cactus patch about getting a soil test. If your plants aren't growing, that's because there's something missing. So I would highly recommend getting a soil test, figuring out what is missing from your soil. And then if you go organic, use the organic products to add the nutrients back in. And if you're conventional, look at the conventional companies to find out what nutrients they have to add it back in. There are 2 different worlds as far as the nutrients, and they use 2 different sources of things. So the products that I use a lot, the down to earth organics, they're made of natural sources because I use organic, I do organic gardening. And that's my method of doing it. But if you need to use conventional or you choose to go conventional, again, I don't really know a lot of the companies that provide those nutrients, but please look it up and I'm sure you're going to find something. 3, how do I know if I have a healthy, good soil or a bad soil? This is a really interesting question, and I'm going to answer it in the gardening context because there are a lot of ways to answer this question in a lot of gray areas, because something that is good over here is not good for this application. So I can't really say that there is a good soil and a bad soil except on the extremes of this soil is full of life and this soil has been contaminated with arsenic, and those are the absolute extremes. But I'm going to answer this in a more general gardening context because I think that's what you're asking. So a healthy, good soil is going to have the right amount and the right kind of microbes in it to work symbiotically with you, your plants, and the environment. Those good microbes are also going to help to keep the bad microbes at bay. There are so many microbes to list, not just nematodes and all the other ones, but we're going to do a future episode on those. I'm not going to get into all the detail about all the microorganisms here. A good soil is also going to have a healthy moisture content. You can take it, you can squeeze it into a ball, but it's not going to compact itself into a hard clay ball. It's also not going to have water wringing out of it. It will have a nice texture where when you open it up, it can still break apart a bit easy, because that means that it does have enough air, but it has enough moisture to be able to hold itself a little bit more compactly. A healthy, good soil is also going to smell like healthy, good soil. You know that smell of dirt, healthy, good dirt, soil, earth. I know I'm not really using the soil as dirt thing. I know, because I have gotten onto people on that too. But a healthy, good soil will smell good and healthy. It will have that rich, earthy smell to it. And hopefully you know what I'm talking about with that. Now, a bad soil will be the opposite of all of this. It's not going to support plant life. It will have a tremendous amount of bad or no good bacteria in it. It will either have little to no moisture, in which case you can take it and it just kind of crumbles and blows away. Too much moisture, it's going to compact hard like a clay ball, or you can wring it out. It's too much. It has way too much of that. And a lot of times that too much water is going to cause all of that anaerobic bacteria to be present, so it has that kind of gross, swampy smell. And that's one of the reasons why swamps have that interesting smell to it, is all of that bacteria in the saturated soil. So I hope that answers that question. It's kind of a broader term. There's a lot of different ways to answer this question, but I think that covers it mostly for gardening. Okay, 4, how do I test my soil? So I went over this in the other question, but find out what soil testing services are in your area. You can also look at the university extensions, see how they want you to get the soil sample, because it may be different per different company. Follow their directions and send your soil in and wait for the results. Okay, question 5, what soil is good for plants? Now this is also a very interesting question because this can vary a bit, but I'll answer it again for gardening. There is no real right answer to this question, but there is. Soil is full of gray areas because what works here will not work here, and then you will always have but what if? It's crazy. But let me help you to answer this question with a couple of plant examples. So what soil is good for potatoes? Let's do that one. Potatoes require a lot of phosphorus. It's the P in the NPK, the middle number. That helps with the potato growth under the soil while providing proper green growth above the soil. If your soil has too much nitrogen in it, the potatoes will grow a lot of green, but not a lot of potatoes. So you want a more heavy phosphorus soil. That type of soil is good for potatoes. And you can get that soil by having your soil and you just add in some bone meal. There's another plane again. Again, we're having this episode kind of be a little bit more laid back, right? Okay. You can get bone meal, you can go buy powdered phosphorus, and I would again follow the directions on the bag. Don't just take the bag home and dump it into your soil. That's not the right thing to do. Follow the directions on the bag. Another type of soil good for plants that we're going to get more specific on is blueberries. Blueberries require a very acidic soil. Most plants will grow in about 6.5 to the 7 pH scale range because at that pH there's the right amount of nutrients available within the soil. So we're going to get into something a little bit more technical here. As the pH, you have the pH scale, right? When you think of the pH scale, normal pH scale, acid to alkaline. Now the soil also follows that pH scale. It maintains homeostasis through the pH scale and through other means as well. Blueberries need more acid, around the 4.5-ish range of soil. The reason being, and I'm going to do my best to explain this without getting too technical because we'll go over this in a later episode as we progress through the more complicated topics of soil, is there is more iron availability at that lower pH, and blueberries need iron in order to grow. This involves a really crazy process called the redox potential, and we're going to get into a lot more detail on that in a later episode, but to put it simply, that is the process by which elements will either gain or basically lose or share electrons in order to help that element be more available for plants. And iron will have a certain amount of electrons at a lower pH that make it available for the blueberries. I hope that makes sense, because you'll hear a lot of people say that you need the lower pH for blueberries, but not know why. And a lot of that reason is because iron has the right amount of electrons at that pH to make it available for the plant. The plant needs that type of iron. Does that make sense? Okay, last question for today from Crushed Bag of Chips. Are there ways to test soil for pesticides? My yard/grass has been getting sprayed for years, but I want to start a garden in the middle of it. I'm really sorry to hear that, and I hope your soil is going to be okay. Most sprays are a mixture of an active ingredient in a solution that helps to keep that active ingredient viable. There's a lot of other things in it, but the majority of solutions are at least composed of that. So find out what sprays, if possible, that were applied. If you don't know, my best answer would be to assume the worst. Not the worst in the sense of the soil will never recover, but the worst in the sense of chemicals. So you can think of it as Roundup was continuously applied, some sort of glyphosate, something very, very heavy with a lot of active ingredients that stay viable in the soil for a while. Just assume the worst, that way you can try to plan for the best. Okay, next, just like I said throughout the episode, please get your soil tested. There are a couple of companies that will test for pesticides. Take a look around on Google soil companies near me, or soil testing companies that will test for pesticides. Some extensions will as well. And I don't think it's a problem if you send them out of state soil. For instance, if you're in Texas and then you find a company in Minnesota that has the testing that you want. But I would call them and just make sure that it's okay. I don't think it should be a problem, but make sure that you call them and get the right answer. Not all soil testing companies will test for pesticides. So do your research and find the one that works for you, and works for you meaning the company that has a decent price, that has the tests that you want, will get you the answers back in the time that you want, and ask you to do the test within a manner that you're able to do it. Okay, the next thing I would recommend is planting a test crop. We went over this a little bit earlier in a prior question, but you can, let's say that we're going to go back to tomatoes. Let's say that you wanted to grow tomatoes in that area. You can dig up the soil and plant the tomato and see how it goes. If you see that it doesn't have a lot of growth and it dies easy, there's probably a lot of either remaining active chemicals in your soil, or it's lacking a lot of nutrients. The thing is that these sprays will kill the good bacteria. They will kill the nutrients. It's going to just strip your soil of all the good things in it. So you can go ahead and plant a test crop and see how it goes. My papers are flying away. That doesn't necessarily mean that if it grows great that you want to continue planting, because you said that your soil has been sprayed for years. And my concern would be that anything that you plant in the soil, that plant is going to take up the nutrients. It's going to take up what's in that soil. So if there are a lot of chemicals in that soil, your plant is going to take some of that in. And that could potentially be dangerous. And the last thing I'd want is for you or anyone to get hurt. So get a soil test, plant a couple of test crops. You're going to see how that grows. Does that plant grow? Does it not grow? The key thing so far will be that soil test. Okay, and I don't like to say this one. It is not my favorite, but I'm going to admit that I had to do this. So when we moved into our house, we had kind of a boomerang section of our backyard that was Bermuda grass. And Bermuda grass grows very well out here in Arizona. It takes the heat, so you're able to have a green yard in the summer. But good lordy, is it invasive. It will grow and grow, and it's hard to kill. Well, when we moved in, we realized that we didn't need the grass patch that the prior owners here had. They had kids, they had grandkids, and so this was a great spot for their family to hang out in, but it's just my husband and I. We didn't need the grass. What we ended up doing, because the Bermuda grass has these roots that grow underground, the rhizomes, and the Bermuda grass grows from there and just spreads and becomes invasive, is we realized that we have to dig up the top couple inches of that soil and discard it. I know. And it breaks my heart to say it, but we had to do it, and you may have to do that too. So not all chemicals will travel down the soil profile, and again, this goes back to what kind of soil that you have, because if your soil is being sprayed and it's a clay soil, it's probably going to stay within that top couple inches of soil, because remember, clay can be more hard and compact, and doesn't allow for a lot of water infiltration. It spreads out more horizontally. So you may end up having to remove some soil depending on how much of that area you want it to grow in. And that can get expensive too. I'm sorry that so far this seems like these are expensive things, but you can probably save a lot of money if you are able to either do this yourself or hire family members to till up the top couple inches of soil and then have it hauled away. Now, don't do that right away. Your soil may not need that, and by doing so, you may strip that soil of anything beneficial that may be there, because remember, topsoil exists in that top couple of inches of soil. You're going to find worms, you'll find good bugs as well if they're there in your sprayed soil. So don't do this method unless you have to. Not only is it expensive and labor intensive, but you are getting rid of soil. Which leads us to the last thing that I would recommend. I would recommend looking into using raised beds. The biggest price with this would be to buy the new soil and to buy the beds. So right now I'm actually in the process of replacing all the wood beds in my garden with Vago garden beds. Not sponsored. I just happen to like them and had a couple friends that use them and found them to be really, really nice, and they should hold up very well out here in the Phoenix summers. So try a couple of raised beds. This provides a couple of benefits. First, you're not digging through and planting in the soil that you know is contaminated. Second, you're putting a bed on top of that soil and filling it with soil. So the soil that your plants are growing in is going to be that soil. Over time, you're going to help the soil underneath, because your water and your nutrients in that soil that you add into the bed will gradually travel down into the soil underneath, helping to flush away any chemicals, residuals that are in that soil. This, again, it's going to take time. And then as you build good bacteria in the soil in your bed, those will also travel down as well, helping to increase the good bacteria colony of the soil underneath. So it's a win all around. It really is. I know that there's some disadvantages to raised bed gardening, but you are able to control pests a little bit better as well, because this is just a contained area of soil. Depending on how high of a bed that you get, that can help to deter critters from getting into it. So my best advice would be to really consider that method, getting a couple of raised beds. Please get your soil tested. That's probably going to be the number one thing. And don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. I really think that there's a lot of different things to consider with this, but you can get your soil to where you want it depending on the method, but it will take time and some very important decisions on your part. Okay guys, so that's it for now. Those were 3 amazing questions. I know that there were a lot of answers that flowed throughout those questions that were very similar, but a lot of things do come down to soil testing and adding nutrients and just knowing the right things to add depending on your soil test. But I was so happy with these questions, and I can't wait to do the next video to answer some more. So thank you everybody, and please, if you have more questions from this video, or you didn't get a chance to submit your question when I asked for questions in my prior video, comment down below. Go ahead. Let's flood this comment section with some more questions, and I'll do as many of these videos as I need to. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and until then, you know what to do. Save the soil.